In this episode, we're going to be looking at reconciliation. The sacrament of reconciliation is sometimes called confession or penance. It's also considered a sacrament of conversion because the person is responding to the call of Jesus to return to obedience to God the Father. By confessing their sins and asking for forgiveness, Catholics believe they're reconciled with God and with those who are hurt by their sins. Catholics believe the Church was given the power to forgive sins by Christ when he said to Peter, "If you forgive anyone's sins, they are forgiven. If you do not forgive them, they are not forgiven." The person confesses their sins. The priest will often offer advice. The person makes an act of contrition, a prayer in which they say they are sorry for their sins. The priest usually gives the penitent a penance, which is an act to perform or prayers to say to help them grow closer to God and reject sinfulness. And the priest will say the prayer of absolution, which is God's forgiveness. Those are all of the parts of the sacrament of reconciliation. So what are the other names for the sacrament of reconciliation? That is penance and confession. And who do Catholics think they are reconciled with by confessing their sins and asking for forgiveness? That's God and those who are hurt by their sins. Exactly how often the sacrament is to be received is not specified, except that the Church says at least once a year. Many Catholics will seek reconciliation more often, and the priest is bound to keep the confession secret. For a person to be forgiven for their sins, they must be genuinely sorry. They must also have a firm purpose of amendment, meaning that they honestly intend to try not to sin again. By making this formal action of receiving the sacrament, Catholics believe that they receive a special grace that helps them try to avoid sinning in the future. It is also believed that when they unburden themselves of their sins in this way, they can experience an inner peace. The Catholic Church teaches that it's essential for Catholics to confess their serious sins, or mortal sins, in this way. How often will Catholics receive reconciliation? So most Catholics seek reconciliation more than once a year, but the Church recommends at least once a year. How often does the Church say reconciliation should be achieved? Once a year. And what are the key features of the sacrament of reconciliation? The person confesses their sins. The priest will often offer advice. The person makes an act of contrition, a prayer in which they say they're sorry for their sins. The priest will usually give the penitent a penance, and the priest will say the prayer of absolution. And what do Catholics believe they gain from receiving reconciliation? That's a special grace that helps them try to avoid sinning in the future and inner peace. Let's go over the key features of the sacrament of reconciliation one more time. The person confesses their sins. The priest will often offer advice. The person makes an act of contrition, which is a prayer in which they say they're sorry for their sins. The priest will usually give the penitent a penance, and the priest will say the prayer of absolution. That's all you need to know about reconciliation.